In a world of hurt and pain, we find a way to break the chain. A caring heart, a guiding light, will lead us through the darkest night. With preservation in our soul, we'll rescue those who've lost control. Escape the grip of a narcissist on our journey to recovery bliss.
Padideh, this is the first time that we've not recorded from opposite sides of the United States.
I know, it's great to have you in Cali, my hometown.
So good to be here.
Yes.
And we had our podcast launch party last night, and that was just amazing over at Firefly. Met some people who actually follow us, which is really fantastic, and some potential collaboration, which is even better.
Yeah, you know, it's funny is halfway through the evening, these two couples come up to us and they said that they both had narcissistic abusive relationships and they wanted our information.
Yeah, in fact, they saw the poster that we had, this one right here. Yeah, it was this one here, right? That we had set out, and they go, I didn't know anybody ever did podcast stuff on that. And we're like, wow. And then a lady went to go message me on Instagram. She was already following me. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I remember I had been drinking too much last night and I said, you go talk to them. I remember that.
Yeah, that's exactly. We were talking about that on the way over, and we said, you know what? I think that Padideh wanted me to do it because she'd had a head start on the alcohol before me.
Tipsy, yes.
Yes, or tispy, as we say sometimes.
Yes.
So today's topic is going to be kind of fun. We want to talk about male victims of narcissistic abuse.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think I am sitting with the king that invented that.
Please,
okay,
make my head
because
swell.
you have a IG called Male Victims of Female Narcissists, and that's how we met.
It is. And do you know why I created the channel? So when most of you who've been following know my backstory, but if you don't, just real briefly, I was married to a female narcissist for 27 years. And the diagnosed variety, I had her diagnosed by a therapist as well, which is kind of unusual, but a turn of events made that happen too. And as I started to try to heal, I started to read books and things, and the overwhelming majority of the material, I would say 95% or better of it, was written by women about men. Like men were the only narcissists on the planet. And there were some things that I felt like I couldn't connect with in what I was reading. Like a man would approach it differently from a woman than a woman might approach it from a man. So that's why I actually started my channel, to kind of give an equal voice to men who were clearly enduring it as well. Right,
but you never thought that you'd have over 10,000 followers, right?
No. In fact, no, not at all. I started the thing, it was almost therapeutic for me to try and get out of my head some of the stuff that I thought was rattling around in there. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe it'll help some other people who are going through it, validate, and here we are a couple years later, and 10,000 plus followers and a podcast with you, and met some amazing people online who are in the same space. And it's been an incredible journey. Interestingly enough, half of my followers are women.
Yeah, I always find that fascinating because how does that actually happen that women are now following you as a male victims of female narcissists?
Well, do you know what they see? They see the men in their lives being abused. So the average person, the average female who follows me either has a husband in a second marriage. They've married a husband who was married prior, and that husband is still being abused by their ex.
Oh, I know that. I can share a story about that. Go ahead.
Okay, well, go ahead.
No, I mean my current and final husband.
Last one.
He's the last one.
This is it.
Well, it's funny because on TikTok they have this thing now where women are filming their husbands and they're saying my current husband, and the guy's like, what do you mean current husband? What are you talking about? But they're filming it and you could see the guy's reaction. But no, seriously, my last husband ever in the entire world. So his ex-wife is a covert narcissist. And I know exactly what you mean. So like when I met him, I said, show me your divorce documents. I want to see them. I want to see what she's saying about you, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, as a divorce attorney, I'm thinking like, okay, is this guy that awful, right? So I'm reading the divorce documents and I'm going, the person that she's describing is not the person I'm falling in love with. And so through that journey, I was like, I didn't even know about narcissism. That's how crazy it was. I learned it as a result of witnessing what he was going through. And I said, one day I said, you know what? They keep talking about narcissists on social media. So I started to research it. So that's why I say, for me, narcissism is only 6 years old. And it's as a result of my husband.
Right. And you didn't even realize at the time you divorced that you were married to a narcissist at all.
No, but he was a malignant narcissist. And the word narcissist I had heard because with my ex-husband, his ex-wife had a book called How to Deal with a Narcissist, and he told me about it. So he's like, you know, when I was divorcing my first wife, she had a book about, can you believe she thinks I'm a narcissist? And I was like, I didn't even know
What's
what that was.
Right? Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, you know, I'm your savior. It's going to be different with me. You know, I mean, I love you unconditionally. And so, but it didn't really click until I met my husband 6 years ago that I was like, wait a minute, there's something really wrong here because the person in these documents that she's describing is not the person I'm falling in love with.
Well, and this ex of your husband's is still trying to abuse him financially and other kind of ways.
Right. So we were talking last night, you and I, with my husband, because you're here in the flesh. So we get to talk to you about a lot of things that we don't normally get to talk to you about. But when we went to our second son's graduation in May, he graduated from Wisconsin, Madison, you know, I was really, really, really hesitant. And for about a month, I was having extreme anxiety and I couldn't sleep. And I was thinking, we're going to see his ex-wife. You know, obviously that's the mother of the children.
Sure.
And so I was like, how do we kind of navigate this? And my husband was like, can you just relax? Can you just do me a favor and just relax? Maybe we won't see her. And I'm like, no, I know something's going to happen. And I'm very intuitive. You know that about me.
Absolutely.
So long story short, we couldn't sit with our kids, our other two kids during the graduation, but we invited her to go to lunch with us and everything was great, John. Like everything was great. Like we were sitting, we were talking, we were laughing with her. I offered to buy her a drink, the whole thing. And then that was on a Saturday. On Sunday night, she wrote my husband an email, sent it to our youngest son, who's 21 years old, and said, you owe me $52,000. And my husband...
52 grand?
Yeah, and my husband, like, thank God he didn't tell me because we were like literally at the airport coming back to California.
Yeah.
And so the next morning, I could just tell something.
And no receipts, by the way. Just, hey, by the way, here, send me 52 grand.
And so the next morning, I said, what's wrong? You know, everything went so well. Like, it was so nice. He goes, I got to tell you something. And I said, what? He goes, she sent an email through our son asking for $52,000. And I said, what receipts? There's the receipts. You know, I'm thinking like, did we miss something? Did you not pay her for something? And I was like, he's like, no, there was nothing. She just said, you know, it was nice to see you. Here's, you know, you owe me $52,000. 52. It's not even $5,200. I'd be like, here's a check for $5,200, but $52,000.
Unbelievable.
So I'm still sort of dealing with that, and I've got one more year. When the youngest graduates, then hopefully
Hopefully you're done.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about and why women follow me. They see the abuse that their husbands get. And of course, they're tied to their husband and they want to know how to go deal with it. And your husband, because I know Jon, he handles her and his situation very, very well. He doesn't let it get to him, which is fantastic.
Well, he's no contact too.
Yeah. So there are other people who do not handle it so well, and the wives see the husbands getting abused, and they want to know how to go deal with these female narcissists. The other the other MO of people who follow me, women who follow me, are women whose sons are being abused, and they're crushed over what's taken place. A lot of the women who reach out to me, and it's always so sweet. They ask if they can follow, and I'm like, absolutely, you can follow. Nobody should be abused. I'm trying to shine a light on men and female narcissism, and absolutely, you fit in here. But in most of the situations, their sons have married a female narcissist, and the female narcissist has done everything they can possibly do to make life difficult for the parent, particularly the mother.
Yes.
And is abusing the mother through the son. Oftentimes, you'll find a female narcissist married to one of these sons encourages the son to not communicate.
Yes. So I had that situation. We were recently had a spa day in a resort, actually in San Diego, called, I think it's Aviala or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was getting a pedicure, and the lady mentioned this. She goes, what do you do? They always kind of talk. And I said, I'm an attorney, and I always say, I've launched a podcast, and she said, what's the podcast about? And I said, Narcissists. And she's like, oh my gosh, they seem to be so prevalent these days. She goes, you know what? I need to talk to you about something. And I was like, oh God, just let me relax. Because whenever you say you're a divorce attorney, people either want to tell you about their divorce or they're getting divorced. And you're just like, please, for the love of God, I don't want to have this conversation. So she said that her son was married to a narcissist, or she believed that he was married to a narcissist. And I said, give me some examples. And two things that I did, I said, to follow you for male victims of female narcissists. And then I said, the second thing was listen to the podcast.
Right.
And she was so grateful. I think I texted you and I said,
Yeah.
we got a new listener, because she was so thankful. But by the end of it, she was in tears.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, my son, this woman came into his life. My son is, they always say how good looking, right? Their child. He's like tall, good looking, blah, blah, blah. He looks like Chris Helmsworth. I was like, Chris Helmsworth, let me see a picture. She shows me pictures. And by the way, she's doing my pedicure during this time.
Oh, wow.
And so she's like, she got pregnant right away, married right away, pregnant right away, blah, 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 blah. And she was in tears. She's like, I have no relationship with my son, and neither does his sister, my daughter. And she said, but I'm definitely going to listen to your podcast. And she's like, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you need to realize this is his journey. And the more you talk bad about her, the more he's going to cling to her, because he's trauma bonded to her. And now she's pregnant. So I said, you need to just kind of, this is your road, and that's not your road, right? And I said, but I will tell you, just be strong for when he comes back.
Yep.
Because he's going to come back, whether it's 2, 3, 5 kids down the road, he's coming back.
Yep. And that's ultimately what you kind of have to hope for, is that these sons, or see clearly what's taking place, because oftentimes the mothers describe their son as having been very loving, and them having been very close to them, and then they meet this woman who basically turns them against their own mother, and it's like the son takes on an almost different kind of personality and starts this abuse of the mother, or removes themselves completely from a relationship with the mother, or they get dragged across the United States or across the world or wherever it might be by this person, and they're controlled. But I don't think on the whole that people understand how often men are abused by narcissistic women, by female narcissists, whether it's a mother or whether it's a spouse. Usually a spouse is the most common. And there's some reasons for that, I think. One of the reasons I think that men kind of don't measure up in all of this, and most of the material is written by women, is that men tend to be, when they're narcissists, they tend to be more overt narcissists, or what we call malignant narcissists. And those are the kinds that you can spot from across the room. So they tend to be rather aggressive. and can be nasty and physical, and that's the typical MO of a male narcissist. Where women kind of fly under the radar, they tend more towards the covert narcissist type, and they'll do anything to kind of protect their image. Where a malignant narcissist kind of just doesn't care, they'll kind of lash out at everybody and everybody around them. There's this group of people around them that know that a male is a narcissist, or know that there's a problem if they don't know it's narcissism. When it's a female, oftentimes they protect their image above all else. And the men, because he's kind of being privately abused, kind of looks like the crazy one. So he may act out aggressively towards the covert narcissist who's lying and gaslighting and has no empathy for him whatsoever, and uses him or financially abuses him, like in your particular situation. That the women are doing this behind the scenes, and he's acting out or lashing out, and it makes him look like the crazy one instead.
Yeah. And, I just want to say, as a woman, there are covert female narcissists. Like, we need to acknowledge that as a society, because I feel like when it comes to abuse of men, I mean, listen, I'm obviously married, happily married. I grew up with 2 brothers. I had a great father. I'm telling you that women do abuse men. And I don't know if it's 50-50. I don't know if it's...
Well, talk about your experience, though. I mean, you work in circles with narcissists, and you've spoken to me some things about that, about kind of women versus men. What would you say about that, like from your personal experience?
Yeah, from my personal experience, I've had clients that were men that were abused by female narcissists. And it was interesting. This one story. Obviously I can't discuss anything confidential, but many years ago, somebody came to me and he said, I cheated on my wife. And he was really eager to tell me that. As a divorce attorney, you're almost like their priest, because they're just
you got to hear it all.
You got to hear it all. And you want to hear it all because you want to make sure if there's something really bad, you're plugging that hole right away, right? Either you're disclosing it to opposing counsel right away. Thankfully, in California, it's a no-fault state.
Right.
Although some people don't like that. They think it should be like Georgia, that is fault, based. So anyway, he said, I cheated on her, and it's really important that you know that. And I'm like, okay. So he starts talking to me.
At least it's honest, right?
Yeah,
Nothing else.
And I was like, okay, great. Next topic, because I'm like, it's no fault. And he said, the reason it's important for me to tell you that is because I was abused for 15 years by this woman. And I knew that the only way to get out of the marriage is to cheat.
I've heard that before.
And I was like, that shocked me. I said, what? I've never heard that before. He goes, no. She was not going to let me go.
And by the way, we don't necessarily recommend that as a strategy to go leave your narcissist, or anybody for that matter.
Unless I cheated, which, kind of her ego was damaged at that point, which we know that narcissists have big egos. And so he said, but now I have to give her everything in order to actually get rid of her. And so I said, okay, are you ready to do that? Give her the house, give her the kids. He's like, absolutely. Otherwise, if I don't continue this relationship that I have on the side that I'm really not even interested in, but for getting my wife out. So he literally signed all the documents to give her everything and move on with his life in peace. Yeah.
I mean, that happens. They're so. I think that men have this tolerance also. That men are expected to take some abuse from women. I as I started venturing into this male victims of female narcissist space, I started to talk to some people who are men whose marriages I respected. And I was shocked, and I mean shocked, at the number of men who said they'd taken a punch from their wife.
A physical punch?
Physical punch.
Wow.
Are you out of your mind? This happened? You have such a great marriage. And even in good marriages, this kind of stuff happens. So I think that men, in some respects, are expected to take the abuse. And if they don't take the abuse, they're seen as not masculine.
That's crazy.
It
I never
is
thought about
crazy.
that.
It is crazy. So to just acknowledge, for a man to acknowledge that he's being abused is a shot, much less from a woman, is a shot personally to his own, seemingly so, is a shot to his own personal masculinity. So men don't even acknowledge the abuse well. There was a lady I met on Instagram when I first kind of joined, and a dear woman. Her name is Dr. Retha Stewart. And Retha, if you're listening out there, you really helped me in many ways when we conversed back then. But she was working on, I think it was her PhD, if I'm not mistaken. She's a doctor, and she was doing research on how men perceive abuse. And through her research, she discovered that men could not even easily just embrace the word.
Abuse.
Like to say that for a man to acknowledge that he's abused is very, very difficult. And we were trying to come up together with some language that we felt resonated. And the language we felt resonated that men could identify with was undeserved cruelty. Are you experiencing undeserved cruelty from somebody?
You've said that before. I think that's such a great way to frame it for men, because I know with my husband, he doesn't want to acknowledge that he was fooled and duped and abused. Like those words, you cannot, like, my husband's very, very even keeled and
Absolutely.
he's very stoic. If you tell him that, if you say, she fooled you, she abused you, he gets really upset because that speaks to his masculinity.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And if somebody acknowledges that, they see themselves as less than a man, they feel like they've not been able to go manage their marriage or their family. And it makes them feel less than. So for them to acknowledge it themselves is hard, much less having the rest of the world acknowledge that men have been abused also. In particularly in recent years with the Me Too movement and things like that, it seems like people attach belief to a woman's statement immediately and discard a man's. I know I experienced that even in my own home church. When they found out I was divorcing, my ex got all of the attention, and they listened to her story, and in fact, I found that she'd been kind of seeing at least one of the pastors behind the scenes for years, saying God knows what, and then when I pulled the trigger and divorced, they wouldn't even talk to me. Like I asked, instead of actually having a conversation with me, they sent me some nasty emails telling me that basically I was going to hell, and I said, hey, well, I'd be happy to meet with you and sit down and have a conversation. They would not even entertain the conversation with me to find out, and again, my ex had some issues where she was kind of pretending she had cancer and she had an emotional obsession with an ex-boyfriend. And they're not interested in these things. So I couldn't even get a hearing from people who should care. And in fact, that was kind of the story across the board. They found out I was divorced. They didn't want to hear about it. Nobody wanted to hear about it. Where she could have the conversation, she could talk about it and did talk about it to other people. I was not even permitted to have the conversation at all.
Right. And it's like, with your situation and my husband's, it's like, oh, a single mom of 3, a single mom of 4. Like, how dare he do this? They are not concerned about him and his story
Correct.
of abuse. They're just, as a society, that's why I'm saying we need to do better, and we need to at least give a voice to each side. Like, I will be honest with you, we have this really good friends of ours, they're filing for divorce. And so I was like, I'm not representing either because I love them both. Obviously, she's a little bit more my friend, and the man is a little bit more friends with my husband. They play golf. And so I want to, when she says things, I want to, unless I can verify with him that what she says is accurate, I have no place for it, right? I'm like, I'm just hearing your side of the story. It's like the person that goes to court and talks first, the judge is like shaking their head. They're like, yeah, sounds good.
Talks first thing is a big deal. You tend to believe what you first hear.
Right. And then the second person or the opposing person that talks, they're like, oh, really? And like the first person left out a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my strategy in court, for anyone listening, is let the other person speak first. I want to know, like I jot down, okay, what are they saying? What are their arguments? Okay, and then I come in with the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're dealing with a narcissist in court, you know, a lot of the things are fabricated.
Yeah.
So you can have like physical evidence in sort of your binder to show like, this is all lies. These are fabrications and they're gross fabrications. These are not little lies, by the way, that narcissists tell in court. So they're trying to garner sympathy and, you know, a different narrative than the truth. Because the truth is
Correct.
They suck at marriage.
Absolutely. And where I think that if people had heard my story or cared to hear it, right, they would have gone, okay, pretending she had cancer? And most people, when, you know, you get tired of kind of explaining when, you know, people find out that you're divorced initially, particularly up front. People, you're divorced? Why? And what I tried to do was kind of dumb it down to since I didn't want to have a lot of conversation about it, dumb it down to the most ridiculous thing. I go, well, she's kind of pretending she had cancer. They go, what? Yeah. And that was kind of the highlight, you know? So at end of conversation, they go, oh, wow. And ultimately the kinds of things I experienced, the abusive things I kind of experienced were so bad that, I mean, I was in a position where I was, you know, I was praying that God would take my life. I mean, it was that bad, you know, to death do us part. And I used to pray, God, I'm ready to go, because I didn't want a divorce. And at the same time, I knew I couldn't stay in this thing and survive. It was really an act of self-preservation to divorce. In fact, I don't believe in divorce. I don't recommend divorce necessarily either. But I found that I was in a position where I just had no choice, and people weren't listening to me, and it made it very, very difficult. And through the process, also, you know, I'm glad to hear that you're like, I want to hear both sides of the thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And you know what's interesting? We talk so much about my older mom, right? My elderly mom on this podcast. She's always told us growing up, she said, there's always two sides to a story when it comes to a husband and wife, and nobody knows the truth unless you lived with them inside the
100%.
house.
100%. Even the kids.
Right. Even the kids don't know. So especially with covert narcissists, because they're not being truthful. They're always, you know, lying.
Yep. And trying to protect their image above all else. Again, they do not want to look like the violator in any kind of way. I can remember asking my ex, I'd sent her to therapists throughout the process, because I thought she had issues with men and she needed to resolve these kinds of things, and she was not getting better. And I can remember asking her one day, I said, are you being truthful with the therapist? And she goes, well, she said, I'm telling her what she wants to hear so that she'll think there's nothing wrong with me. Her exact words. Which again goes to this is kind of how narcissists go. They want to protect, female narcissists go. They tend to run under the radar, and they want to protect their image above all else, and they want to make the man look like the idiot and the crazy one.
Okay, let me circle back. So she said to you that she was telling the therapist that she's supposed to be 100% honest
Yes.
with, right? She told you that she was telling the therapist what the therapist wanted to hear.
Absolutely, 100%.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Just when you think covert narcissists can't get any worse, your ex surprises me.
The moments of honesty are rare, but when you get them, they're gems, you know?
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
And then in that moment, I thought, what about all the money we wasted in this as well? You know, it's kind of crazy, but that's how they go. They try to protect their image above all else. They throw the man under the bus. They tend to weaponize the children and involve them in ways they shouldn't. Like
yes.
Like your husband's ex sending an email through the 21-year-old to his dad, and they can weaponize the children against the father. And generally speaking, I think the courts are less favorable towards men and their relationships with children than with the woman. Usually, even the kids are going to go with the woman in some kind of way and get primary custody for the most part. That doesn't mean shared custody can't exist, but I think the court system is negatively disposed towards men.
Well, it's funny because 22 years ago, I would say that statement was correct when I first started practicing.
Yeah.
But as I know for California, it's an evolving court.
Yes.
And I know that as women have entered into the workforce and become educated to enter into the workforce, that's not necessarily true in California.
I'm glad to hear
Courts
that.
are more 50-50. They want to know, like, it used to be where we go to court and say, well, we represent the mom and she's a stay-at-home mom. And so that was like, okay, of course she's going to get more time because dad's at work. So
Right.
we'd rather have the child be with one of the parents, right? And so now that argument doesn't work because if mom is also working full-time, as dad is working full-time, then the argument, then you can't have that argument, right? So courts in California, there's not a presumption of 50-50. In Florida, it's a presumption of 50-50.
Yes.
Which I'm not going to tell you what my opinion is, but there's a presumption. So like Michigan, I was an attorney in Michigan, as you know, for a very high profile case. And there was a presumption of 50-50. So we had to show in that case that the father had molested and raped his 3.5-year-old. And so because of that, that presumption should not prevail.
Correct.
And this is the reason why. And so, but it was an uphill battle. Like CPS had to testify. We had to get the rape kit. We had to get all the things, okay? Because a district attorney in Michigan would not prosecute because the child could not really, can't testify, right? So,
and with covert narcissists also working to preserve their persona, their public persona, and make themselves look good, they often involve the kids. And in my particular situation, the courts were irrelevant because I waited till my kids were out of high school in order to divorce. But she'd been working on them so long, they chose not to have a relationship with me by and large. So they're weaponizing even behind the scenes without the courts having been involved. They're helping the kids not choose the man, unfortunately, where I can honestly say I just didn't ever have conversation with my kids about my ex at all. I wanted and continue to want them to view her in a favorable light. She's their mother and they always need a relationship with her, so I'll speak favorably and do. And the issues that we had are between she and I.
correct.
And that is absolutely not how my ex went and handled that with my children. Say she was working on them for, I can see now, years back, trying to create a false image of me so that they would choose not to have a relationship with me.
Well, two things I want to say about that. The first is you're absolutely 100% correct. And when does this parental alienation happen? I believe it happens the day that they meet you. So the day that they meet you and they're like, I'm going to have a child with this person, even before they're pregnant or anything like that, they're thinking, I'm going to get that kid on my side.
Absolutely. And I could go back, even for me, I wouldn't go back quite that far, but from the time my kids were born, where she was kind of pushing me aside, where I wanted to be involved, like she had to win. She had to be the primary caretaker. She had to be the one. I always felt, I can remember telling her when my kids were little, I feel like I'm in competition with you. This is not a competition. I'm their father, and I can help and do these kinds of things. And you're kind of stiff-arming me, always trying to push me away. And I think it's to foster that dependence on them.
Yes.
So that when the time comes, in the back of their minds, they know something's going to happen. When the time comes, they're ready and they've won the children.
Well, also, the second thing I wanted to say, you're absolutely right, is that narcissists are afraid of abandonment. Remember that a narcissist is not born a narcissist. Some trauma happens, I believe, going back to Freud, who I really admire, which probably going to get some hell for that in the comments, is from 9 to, I think he said 7. I would say 3 to 9 is the age, I think. Some trauma happens to the narcissist. either they were abandoned, abused, neglected, whatever it is, and then they grow up with this alter ego.
Yes.
And so they grow up always having to self-protect. So they know when they meet you, you're going to leave them. And
Yes.
they'll admit that. They'll say, you're going to leave me at some point. And all you're doing is you're trying to show them unconditional love. Like, I'll never leave you. And that's what they want. They want that victim that's never going to leave. And so absolutely,
in fact, it's interesting you said that. The therapist I took my ex to, I had her tell her that she was narcissist. I said she needs to know, because if something's wrong with a person, they need to know. She said, I don't know about that. She was probably smarter than I was in it. She said, I just don't think that's going to go well. And I said, I really feel strongly about this. If she's got something wrong with her, she needs to know.
yes.
At least you need to say it.
Yes.
And she did at one point in time have a conversation with her where she told her that she felt like she had a cluster B personality disorder. She lived somewhere between borderline and narcissistic personality disorder, closer to the narcissist. And this therapist told me about the conversation, and she said, my ex responded to her, but I'm not a narcissist, am I? She says, I'm not telling you you're a narcissist, but I'm telling you that I think you have a cluster B personality disorder and that you live somewhere between borderline and narcissistic personality disorder. And she goes, but I'm not a narcissist, right? She goes, again, I'm telling you that I think you have a cluster B personality disorder and that you live somewhere between narcissist and borderline. She goes, well, as long as I'm not a narcissist. And the therapist said to her, I just want you to know, if you continue down this path, that I do believe that you will be divorced. Now, at the time, I'd not even breathed the word, because it took me 25 years to even assent to the fact that was a possibility. It was just not in my mind. But the therapist had the insight at the time, and I think perhaps knew me better than I knew myself in these conversations, to say, to my ex, this is coming.
Right.
And her response was, oh, he'll never leave me. And she goes, I don't think that's the case. And sure enough, a couple of years later, I pulled the plug and we divorced. And ultimately in these kinds of situations, women are, like you said, they're kind of, in some respects, preparing for it, but on the exterior, they really don't necessarily want to admit it. Now, I would tell you also that I think my ex's situation, she had a kind of a hereditary component in these kinds of things. As I look back on her mother's relationship with her husband, she handled it the exact same way. She badmouthed the husband to the children. She had her own little tribe with the kids. The father was always ostracized from the family, and men experience that even when before they're divorced. The narcissistic mother will kind of push them away, and they're outsiders in their own families.
Right.
So there was a hereditary component for her as well, where I think narcissistic behavior was modeled by her mother.
Yeah, so I just think it's fascinating. I feel like all the stories are different, but the blueprint of the covert narcissist is always the same.
Yeah, and what you described with the trauma, my ex has that as well on top of it. So
Yes.
trauma at a very young age, and then ultimately, they develop this lack of conscience from that trauma, and they don't have the resources to kind of cope with it, so they push it out of their head. They disconnect, they dissociate from it. And this becomes their coping mechanism as they get older. And they don't ever want to have a conscience, because if they had a conscience and would evaluate their own behavior, they would find that, and they don't want to find it.
Right. That's a great way of saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know with my my husband's ex-wife, she's the youngest of 9, and her father had multiple children that she doesn't even know, like the stepkids and all these other kids. And then, and he was, I believe, an alcoholic and died at a young age, believe it or not, after the 9 kids. And she had to fend for herself. There was no food in the house. She's always fending for herself. So she tells our boys, when they say, Mom, like, Dad gives money for child support, because in New York it's until 21 or 22 if they're in college.
Yeah.
thankfully in California, it's still 18 or 19 if they're in high school. So
Right.
we're still paying child support. And she says, well, I didn't have food when I was little. Why do you think you deserve to have food in the house?
Wow.
And they're just like, because dad gives you money for us. So we're not even asking you, right? They're older, so they can say that. We're not even asking you to spend your own money, but dad gives you money. No, that's my money. That's not your money.
And this is child support.
Correct. So I'm just telling you, so they have food insecurity. I don't want to cry, but they have food insecurity.
Unbelievable.
And because of that, I mean, they're 6'2", so you can imagine they work out, they play sports, they
Yeah.
need, a lot of food, and they have food insecurity. So I'm constantly sending them $100 here, $50 here. Can I have money for food? Can I have money? We're constantly doing that on top of support.
Which is abuse by a female narcissist of her own children.
Correct.
Like you're experiencing,
Correct.
the men in your life are experiencing it on multiple levels. You have your husband who's experiencing it from his ex, and then you have his sons who are also experiencing it from their mother.
Correct. And so we're hyper vigilant to make sure that one of them doesn't become a narcissist, right? And so we have our eye on one. I won't say which one, but I think we talked about this last night. My husband talked to you about it. Like, we're a little bit afraid, right? Because this is going to breed narcissism.
Yes. Well, it can, because again, the goals are different. The narcissist is always looking for dependence from the children, and they're not. Where a father, I think, particularly, is trying to raise kids who are more independent, and the narcissist wants nothing but dependence and control of the children. So they're trying to manipulate the children into this control sort of thing where they can get whatever they want out of them, and if they don't, they discard them like they would anybody else who kind of comes against them. But again, your kids are enduring this. Your sons are enduring this in a very difficult way, and they're going to have to, hopefully understand this and kind of work their way out of it, because they've been modeled. They've had narcissistic tendencies modeled from their mother, as my kids have as well. And my kids, I'm frightened some days because of the way they handle conflict, and the way they disrespect me is exactly the way she disrespected her father, and exactly the way her mother modeled this to the child. And I hope that one day my kids kind of figure it out and understand it. And these are the results of stuff that goes on with female narcissistic abuse. I want to say to men, you're not alone in this, and the fact that you couldn't make this work with your narcissistic wife is not your fault. I was telling you earlier about the rare moments of honesty with my ex, and I can remember her saying something to me one time where I was talking about how she was treating me, and her words to me were, well, I would have done this with anybody.
Oof.
Right?
I just got shivers when you just said that.
I would have done this with
That's
anybody.
scary.
It is scary. And that's the reality, men, of your situation. This is not personal against you.
Yes.
This is not a lack of your ability to go manage your marriage or your family. This is not your doing. If this female narcissist had married somebody else, this would have happened. And some of the male victims I talked to on Instagram, their wives have discarded them, and they are on in another relationship, and they're like, well, what's your advice? And I go, grab some popcorn and watch the show.
Yes.
Because you are going to see this again. As they get involved with other people, you will see this narcissistic abuse surface itself in their next relationship.
Right. And to your point, there's been situations where the ex-husband who was abused will get a call from the new husband
100%.
who's saying, by the way, did this happen to you? Because they're
Yep.
also being abused, right? And so to your point, that happens. I mean, mind you, my husband has been divorced 15 years.
Wow.
This is not something that just happened where you're like, okay, 3 months ago they finalized. This is 15 years.
And she is still
Yes.
trying to financially abuse him.
Yes. And then they were married for 14 years and then 50, so it's 30 years of abuse that he suffered. And when you talk about, wanting to take your own life, that is also a conversation that needs to be had, because we know people that have men who have taken their own lives. And my husband was, attempted it.
And by the way,
So-
statistically speaking, men are far more likely to do that than women.
Right. And that's a conversation too that we should have, what happens when the man is at the last stop,
Yep.
and he's like, listen, my husband said, I'm going to put all the money in trust accounts for my sons and I'm going to do it. And it was really by the grace of God that he didn't. And so that makes me angry. That, like, when you talk about like what makes the woman reach out to you, stories like that, like, you were going to be the cause of my husband not being here, whether I'm with him or not.
Yep.
Like, how dare you? And so that's the anxiety I was
Yeah.
feeling, like a month before seeing her at the graduation. Now we have another graduation next year. So, I'll talk to you about that off
Yeah.
the record, but
Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah. Well, men, you're not alone. Know that this is not a failure on your part, that this would have happened no matter what, it's not personal. It's not because of you. That if they'd married somebody else, again, they would have encountered and done these same kinds of things. And I would encourage you to one other thing, which is to go find some people who believe you. There are people who will believe you, who understand these kinds of things. Seek out and try to find people who understand something about narcissistic abuse, and see if you can't reach out to them. I have a friend that I work with who was a clinical therapist at one time, and for years he just listened to me and watched, the abuse go on. Interestingly enough, never told me to divorce, not a single time. I had to allow me to come to that conclusion on my own, and I had to go do that. But his listening was helpful. My best friend also, who happens to be in studio with us, kind of watching today, also did nothing but listen and continues to listen when I need to talk. And there are times that I still need to talk about these kinds of things, because this situation is woven into the fabric of my life. And although I've been divorced for 5 years, that doesn't mean the pain goes away. That doesn't mean I don't have to deal with some of the fallout of this. Like your husband is still, hey, here's a bill for $52,000. No receipts attached, but I'd like for you to write the check. It's crazy. And years later, even after a divorce, some of these female narcissists come back and still continue to try to abuse men. So you have to have people around you who love you and are willing to listen, and the best gift you can give somebody, particularly a guy, I think, in this, who's living these kinds of situations, is to believe them. That's the greatest gift I think you can give a man who might be enduring these kinds of things. And when he talks about the situations, because the female narcissist is often so vehemently protective of their public persona, initially when a man starts talking about these kinds of things, it's like there's no way this can be happening. If they know the one, there's no way that she could be doing this or she could be doing that. It's very hard for other people outside to wrap their minds around this kind of thing happening, because the narcissist is covert and is protecting their public image, because they're good at it.
They're great at it.
Yeah.
They're great
So
at
the
it.
man, so you're going, I'm going crazy dealing with this kind of thing. Her image looks fantastic. You're falling apart. And they're going, you're the crazy one. That's the natural conclusion. So if a man comes to you and says, I'm experiencing these kinds of things, the best gift you could give him is to believe him and to listen.
Yeah, that's great advice. And also to follow you on Instagram, obviously to listen to our podcast. And you do a lot of coaching with men as well and women.
Yep.
And so definitely, reach out. You're not alone. I wish that I knew that. My husband says this all the time. I wish I had you guys when I was going through this.
Yeah.
I
wish I had us guys when we were going through it.
He listens. A lot of times we'll drive to San Diego, we'll go to Palm Springs, we'll go to Santa Barbara. So we do these long drives and he'll listen to us and he'll go, gosh, I wish I had that.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish I had this wisdom.
Yep.
And so he didn't even know what it was, to your point.
And one of the other things I want to say before we kind of close out here today is this. Because we're talking about men here and how they are victimized by female narcissists does not mean that we don't care about women and they're being victimized by male narcissists as well.
Of course.
That's nobody should have to go through that, male or female. So if you're in a place where you're being victimized by a narcissist, we want you to know that we're with you, male or female. We just want to take the day today to kind of shine a light on how men are perceived with this, because it really is different, and we're more likely seen even in situations where we're victimized as the crazy ones, and it's just different. We want to shine a light on that today. It's a good conversation today.
Yes, it was great to have you in studio.
It is so nice to look across the couch at you today instead of having to just stare at you at a screen. And Lena and JC, who I just met in person for the first time, thank you guys for being a part of our journey here. Olus Media is where we're at today recording, and they got us started, and we're indebted to you for your work with us. So thank you so much. You can look them up at olusmedia.com, I think, if you're interested, and they're wonderful people and can help you get going on a podcast like they did us. Other than that, you can find us on Instagram at narc.podcast. This one right here at Jafari Legal on Instagram, and I'm Male Victims of Female Narcissists on Instagram as well. So we hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for the conversation with us and enjoying your time.
The Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel discusses very emotional situations, including suicide. If you are in that situation, we recommend that you immediately seek out professional help, because you are important and your life is worth preserving. Please take this seriously and tell someone your situation. To reach the National Suicide Hotline, call or text 988 from any phone. Thank you for listening to the Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To hear other episodes or read the associated blogs, visit www.narcissistabuserecoverychannel.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram with the handle narc.podcast. The guest views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are their own. The information presented is for general informational purposes only and is not intended to be legal advice. The co-hosts are not licensed therapists. Seek professional help, as information is often state-specific. The Narcissist Abuse Recovery Channel is produced in studios in California and Georgia.